when the boat comes in.
Hello and welcome to the When the Boat Comes In podcast with me, Chris Watts. I hope you've been enjoying the podcast so far. On to episode 3, Fish in Woolly Jumpers. Yeah, this has to be one of my favourite episodes. I was saying in the previous podcast how the second episode is probably one of my least favourites, but episode 3, Fish in Woolly Jumpers, is probably one of my favourites. It's up in the top 3, I'd say. It's the sheep stealing episode. Of course, this is where Jack Ford and Matt Headley, they go sheep stealing along with the rest of B Company, their old platoon. Yeah, and it's such a great episode, isn't it? I mean, it's one of them moments in When the Boat Comes In that defines the series, really. If you talk about When the Boat Comes Into somebody, they'll probably talk about this episode, won't they? The sheep stealing. Yeah, of course, things were very desperate back then. There were no jobs, nobody had any money, so as Jack says, they're more like Robin Hood and his merry men. Yeah, they go sheep stealing. They sell off some of them for beer money, but they also give them out as well, don't they, to help people. As he says, there's somebody who has 5 kids, he's a widow, etc. So you can see why they did it. You know, and I think it's fantastic. The way they do it is like trench raids, isn't it? And it's planned in that sort of military style. And this is a fantastic episode for so many reasons. It's the first time that Jack betrays Jesse, really, doesn't he? Although Jesse sort of... they needed to take it in the next step in their relationship, if you know what I mean. But then again, it was the era, wasn't it? That was the era, and she didn't want to get pregnant for obvious reasons. They were struggling with money. She was supporting the family, so I get that. But of course, he goes round Matt Headley's house, and his sister's there. He meets her for the first time. She likes a cigarette, so he offers her one like a gentleman. And then later on, of course, they've been drinking all night long, haven't they? And they're singing old army songs. And yeah, Matt goes to bed, and then later on, his sister comes down, and this is where Jesse and Jack sort of is coming off the rails a bit. Although I think he always loved Jesse. It's just obviously he couldn't wait, and you know that's the way it went. And yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, with Matt's sister. Is she a loved character, or do people not like her because this happened with Jack? I mean, I remember later on she says, "I always wanted you, I'm not going to lie," when she gets pregnant. Yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's such a fantastic series, and this episode has to be one of the best, doesn't it? So, and of course you see Tom. Tom's outside looking at this all happening. He's figured it out, hasn't he? That Jack's having a fling with Matt's sister. And then he says to Jack that he wants to be involved in the sheep stealing, although he doesn't know what it is at this point because it's all very hush-hush. And Jack says, "Tom's the right name for you, Peeping Tom." Yeah, so he was very clever there, wasn't he? I thought he was very clever to manage to get in on that job because he never fought before. That's the thing. All the others are like, well, he didn't go to France, so what does he know about trench raids? But he does come through in the end, although he leaves a bucket, doesn't he? He leaves a bucket behind, and then Jack has to bail him out. And that's a brilliant scene, isn't it? And of course, the policeman gets it in the end.
Hey, you!
You've killed him. Don't be daft. It's a sheep were killed.
Earlier on in the episode, of course, Jack and Billy go for a hike in Morecambe. This is where all of the sheep are, and yeah, it's quite funny. They get on quite well, don't they? And well, the funniest bit there has to be when the policeman comes over and Billy's like, watching birds. Yeah, ornithology, isn't he? But for you, watching birds will be fine. You know, it's quite funny how in that era, if you spoke in a posh voice, you were taken a lot more seriously, wouldn't you? And then the police officers, like the policeman, is like, "Oh, sorry, sir," you know. And it was very lucky they had the glasses, though, wasn't it? They had Captain Manners glasses, and yeah, Jack had them. But I love the bit where he's explaining about during the war, and he wants to know from Billy, like, what does this mean? Basically, Manners' son was fighting with him in the First World War. He gave him his binoculars. But he said to him, "I want to dine at the Savile." And then he says all this amazing food that he's going to eat, the white bait and the steak. And then he asks Billy, he's like, "So what is the Savile?" And he says, "It's a gentleman's club." So, yeah. So it's just such a great series, isn't it?
Can I have another cigarette?
Of course. I'll have one with you.
Oh, I didn't mean... I don't think I should smoke it down here.
I do. You're a very pretty woman.
I think you've had a drop too much.
I have. But I can still see you're pretty.
Hey, now, wait a minute.
And I can still think and all.
A funny way of thinking you've got.
You said 3 months and 2 leaves. And then you said I still miss him.
Well, I do.
That was over 4 years ago, you said. 4 years without a man.
I didn't say that.
You didn't have to.
Very rude.
Not rude, money lass. Honest. It's been a long time for me and all. Too bloody long.
So Dolly and Jack get together, and yeah, I mean, he just wanted to get his leg over, didn't he? Let's be honest about it. And then it continues. He sees her in the next episode, doesn't he, at Manners' place. She's working there as a parlour maid. And yeah, I mean, personality-wise, I don't think they were really made for each other, were they? I mean, it's interesting. Sometimes opposites attract. But yeah, Jack's very intelligent, whereas Dolly, I'm not saying she's thick, but compared to, obviously, Jessie Seaton, she's not mentally that good, is she, compared. But she seems nice enough, but I do wonder sometimes, like, some of the scenes. It's funny when she's like, "I always wanted you," and when she gets pregnant, and there'll be more to talk about on that subject. But yeah, Jack and Dolly, I think it could have worked if they had the kid. I think if they had the kid, it could have worked. Yeah, I think it would have. But they didn't, of course, as we'll talk about in future podcasts. But with this episode, it is one of the best, without doubt, without question. I mean, there's so many great moments in it.
Good night, Mr. Ford.
Good night.
I'll see you in the morning.
It is the bloody morning.
When are you going up?
Well, we might as well have a nightcap first.
You've, of course, got the scene with Jack and Matt Headley at Matt's house, at his parents' house, where they're singing. And I do like these drunken singing scenes. They're quite funny, aren't they? I like the one where Matt is really drunk. I mean, that's funny, isn't it, in a later episode. This is to do with when he does something wrong at the Fitters Union, and he just takes to drink, doesn't he? And his partner won't let him in the house because he's so drunk. But very funny, aren't they, those scenes? I do love those scenes. And some of those old songs, I mean, there must have been a lot of camaraderie, that's the word, in the army. Obviously, if he was in the army, you know, it's life or death. So I love those scenes. I think they're fantastic.
Down that long, long trail with you. Seems like ages ago.
Another bloody world.
At least we haven't forgotten trench raids.
Just as well.
That lass of yours, has she any idea what you're up to?
No.
You going to tell her?
Maybe. After we're married. If we ever are.
Another thing Billy says, which is quite humorous when they're out on the hike, is when Jack says what sandwiches they've got, and Billy says, "Oh, that's convenient because they've got mutton sandwiches. They've got lamb sandwiches." And of course, all the lambs are there. But yeah, I mean, that whole scenario is great, and with that bit where he talks posh, Jack actually takes this on board in a future episode, doesn't he? Do you remember when he has to be king for a day? I think the name of the episode is he has to pretend to be somebody else. And yeah, he gets this from Billy, actually, which is very different because Billy, I don't think there's another example where Jack learns from somebody to better himself, because he adapts to the situation, doesn't he, in King for a Day? That's a great episode as well. Very different, though. This is all about Jack getting on, isn't it? It's about buying a house for Horatio Manners without them realising that it's for Horatio Manners. So he has to invent this story up about how he got his fortune, and then he gets it for a really cut price, doesn't he? So he does a deal with Manners, so he gets a certain percentage. And yeah, Jack's brilliant, and he's so crafty, clever man, very clever. And he'll always be looking at the situation. He'll be weighing things up, thinking, well, how can I make some money out of this? And real entrepreneurial spirit, really, from Jack Ford.
Why don't you come out with me tomorrow? We'll take a hike, stretch your legs.
Where to?
Morpeth?
Yeah, I'd like to, Jack.
Hey, Jack, I was nearly forgetting now what Tom was in. He left a message to say he's been looking all over for you.
All right, Mrs. Seaton. Did he say what it was about?
A fella he knew in the army, Bert Mather. He was killed, poor lad. Tom was wondering if you could help him find his widow's address.
I see.
I'm gonna get on with the tea.
As I always say when I do the podcast, please get involved. It's always lovely to hear from you when you type on the YouTube feed. And there's a lot of love for this show when the boat comes in. As I said before, it is kind of a mystery why it's not on the BBC or it hasn't been shown much, although apparently it's going to be back on the drama channel soon if you haven't got the box set. I think a lot of fans have got the box set though, because it just isn't shown enough on the TV, is it? I mean, it deserves a lot more respect, I think. I love the show. I think it's fantastic. The acting is top drawer, and what I love about the YouTube channel is I've shared clips from the show. People haven't seen it before, and they're like, what a brilliant show. Where can I watch this? I always say buy the DVDs, but yeah, it is going to be on the drama channel soon. But yeah, I do love that about the YouTube channel, that I can share these clips and talk about the episodes, and then it'll get more... I mean, a lot of people know about it already, but of course younger people who haven't seen the show, I'm not that old, but you know what I mean. If they haven't been introduced to the show by family members, how are they going to know about it? Because you wouldn't look for it. But if you've never seen it, if you don't know anything about it, I don't think you'd just buy the series. So that's why I'm really enjoying putting together these podcasts for everyone, and I'm loving uploading the episodes as well and the moments. So thanks a lot. It's been great, and there'll be more of these to come.
When the boat comes in,